The August primaries are closing in, which means it's time for a full-fledged Commitment 2024 coverage here on Heart of the Matter. For the next 4 Sundays, we'll gear you up for Election Day as we hear from candidates and analyze some of the biggest races before voters in Kansas and Missouri. With 23 days to go, let's jump in and discuss one of the most pivotal national races in our backyard, the race for U.S. Senate in Missouri. Incumbent Republican Senator Josh Hawley will work to keep his job for another term. He's running unopposed next month on the Republican side. This time around, the action is on the other side of the aisle. 4 Democrats want a shot at taking on Hawley in November. Mita Biswas of St. Louis, activist December Harmon from Columbia, attorney and antitrust advocate Lucas Kunce of Independence, and State Senator Karla May of St. Louis. Kunce is a clear frontrunner when it comes to fundraising, with more than $3 million cash on hand. He only lost by 5 points to Trudy Busch Valentine in 2022 and launched a run at Hawley's job a year and a half ago with an ad highlighting the senator's actions leading up to and on January 6th.
Josh Hawley is a fraud and a coward. And by the time I'm done with him, the whole world's going to know it.
The latest poll from Emerson College in the Hill shows Kunce 9 points down from Senator Hawley ahead of the primaries, though the gap has closed a bit since February. Let's get into the race with our roundtable of journalists. Please welcome back Brian Ellison, host contributor with KCUR, and KMBC9 political reporter Michael Mahoney. And I know we have the primaries first, but whoever wins next month has to have the staying power and support to unseat a sitting senator if they want to win in November. So who's emerging as the viable candidate right now?
It's Kunce's primary nomination to lose at this point. Number one, he ran a very effective primary campaign against Busch Valentine a couple of years ago. In that race, he didn't win it, but he was an effective fundraiser. He's effectively fundraising this time. Money is important in politics, whether you like it or not, and almost everybody expects him to come out of this thing as the Democratic nominee.
Yeah, I mean, a very successful fundraiser. Actually was raising more money than Josh Hawley at some of the earlier stages of the campaign. I don't expect that necessarily to continue as the November election gets closer. But I think Lucas Kunce also has a pretty significant name recognition advantage over his primary Democratic opponent, Karla May. She's a state senator from St. Louis. She's been had a long term of service, been very effective as a Democratic super minority state senator can be. Sure. But she served 8 years in the House. She's now approaching term limits in the Senate. Has a lot of support in St. Louis, but I think Lucas Kunce has the statewide name recognition because of that earlier campaign against Trudy Busch Valentine that I think will probably serve him well in this primary.
Yeah, and got into this race very early.
He pretty much started running for this Senate seat as soon as his campaign, actually after the 2022 cycle ended. So he's been out there doing this for a long time.
And I will say, Cody, I think those numbers that you showed from that Emerson College poll should be of concern to Josh Hawley. And in theory, his lead should be a lot bigger than that, given that he's the incumbent, given the Republican lean of the state of Missouri. So I think there probably is some concern. Even so, it would require a perfect storm, something like Todd Aiken's stumble against Claire McCaskill some years ago for a Democrat, any Democrat, to unseat an incumbent like Josh Hawley.
Yeah, Cody, one of the things that people in the political business look for in an incumbent is to whether or not in the early polling they are above or below 50%. When you have an incumbent that is below 50%, in this case, Hawley's number, according to the Emerson poll, is at 47%. That's a sense of concern, but the Hawley campaign seems pretty confident right now that they're a known, they have a known candidate who is very popular in a very red state, and they like their shot going.
Yeah, when we talk about it, Missouri hasn't elected a Democrat in the Senate in more than a decade, right? And so there is that need to get above the fray a little bit. The big theme that we've been seeing from the campaigns, it really involves preventing more forced conservatism, I guess you could say, in government. At least 2 of the candidates, Kunce and December Harmon from Columbia, have support congressional term limits. Do you think that that's going to be something that comes up in this campaign?
You know, I think any Democrat who's running for this seat has to sort of grasp at something they can cling to that will set them apart. Term limits is an ongoing conversation. It's been around for at least a generation. It never gains any traction. It would require a constitutional amendment. It seems unlikely that that's going to change. And of course, here in Missouri, we have an excellent example of one of the downsides of term limits, which is that candidates aren't aren't around for very long, they don't develop relationships, and it tends to result in a more polarized House and Senate in Jefferson City.
And the other part of that on term limits in Missouri, what you see is that government then gets directed, at the very least, by lobbyists, who in many cases are former legislators who then go into the lobbying business. In Jefferson City and the state of Missouri's political community is filled with former legislators now lobby. There's one other thing I want to point out, and that's something that Brian said. After Josh Hawley's famous salute and fist to the January 6th crowd, people were saying, you know, there needs to be, as you mentioned, Brian, a major mistake by Josh Hawley. He hasn't committed that. In fact, he turned the January 6th element around to being a big fundraiser for him. And for Coons or whomever the Democratic nominee is, they're going to have to rely on Josh Hawley making a big mistake.
January 6th too far removed for that to be a mistake in the campaign?
I don't think it's very fresh in people's memory, and not only that, but Josh Hawley has actually taken some steps in the last year to try to endear himself to that more moderate voter, which seems surprising because Josh Hawley is a very conservative Republican candidate, but he seems to be drawing the support of the Teamsters. He has taken on big technology, which is resonating with a lot of folks in Missouri who identify as less conservative. So I think Josh Hawley is aware that Lucas Coons presents at least the inklings of a competitive challenge and is taking some steps for that.
All right, we'll leave it there.